tell if you can trust the information you're reading? For instance, is there a new political book that promises to humiliate a candidate that you can't stand? Should you just read it and take it at face value? It claims to be nonfiction after all. That means it's true, right? That's what the book we're going to talk about today is going to discuss. Hi there, I'm Linda Maxey, the author of the Library Lynn books, and today we're going to talk about how to read nonfiction like a professor, a smart, irreverent guide to biography, history, journalism, blogs, and everything in between by Thomas C. Foster. You may be familiar with Thomas Foster from his books, How to Read Literature Like a Professor and How to Read Poetry Like a Professor. There are several of these books, and I'll list more of them at the end of the video. Foster is a retired English professor from the University of Michigan, Flint, where he taught contemporary fiction, drama, poetry, and Greek and Roman literature. He also taught creative writing and composition. I first became interested in Foster's books when I read 25 Books That Shaped America while I was a high school librarian. I read several of the books on his list and thoroughly enjoyed the autobiography of Benjamin Franklin, which he recommended. I went on to read The Last of the Mohicans, which was the next book listed, and I have to confess that I enjoyed that one very little. I haven't gone back to reread what Foster had to say about it, but I seem to remember him warning that it's not an easy read, but it was important in the history of American literature. I didn't enjoy it, but if you read it, I'd say don't watch the Daniel Day-Lewis movie beforehand thinking it will make it easier to understand. It's quite different from the movie. But let's move on to this book. I'll follow my familiar format in this video. I'll cover the 3 main points I got from the book, and what I liked least and what I liked best about it, and then at the end I'll cover the number 1 life lesson I got from the book. So here are the points. Point number 1, nonfiction writing serves an important purpose. I mean, I guess that's obvious, but maybe not. I'm not talking about just for nerds like me who really enjoy learning new things as a hobby. No less than the health of communities and our democracy depends on reporters and nonfiction writers to keep us informed about what's really going on in the world. And they need to be accurate and they need to be truthful. And while we like to think the people we elect and hire to run our governments, police forces, school divisions, and public health services are all upstanding people who want nothing more than to unselfishly serve the public good, the truth is sometimes they fall short of our expectations. Because of this, we need reporters who are brave enough to find the truth, thorough enough to document how they know it's the truth so that we know they know what they're talking about, and then good enough writers to make that truth understandable to the rest of us. Without reporters, corruption would run amok and chances of uncovering it would be slim, at least before irreparable damage is done. Foster spends a lot of time in this book discussing how an ordinary person who's not an expert in the field can separate good information from bad information. In the chapter on political writing, for example, he compares 3 books that came out in the first 2 years of Donald Trump's presidency. The first was Fire and Fury by Michael Wolff. It was a tell-all about what Wolff found when he began talking to the people who were working in the Trump White House. This book is used as an example of a poorly conceived and executed nonfiction book. Foster explains why, even if the information it gives is true, it was still a bad book. The second book was A Higher Loyalty, Truth, Lies, and Leaderships by James Comey. The former FBI director was quite critical of the Trump presidency, and he tells his side of the story about his role in announcing the FBI investigation into Hillary Clinton's email server right before the 2016 election. Foster has both good and bad things to say about Comey's book. And finally, he covers Fear, Trump in the White House by Bob Woodward. This, he says, is good journalism and a good book, and he explains why, even though he admits it reveals little about the Trump White House that wasn't previously known. Political writing was a very interesting and informative chapter. Point number 2. The internet has leveled the information playing field. This is a great blessing, but it's an even greater curse. It's not hard to see what the internet has done for us. I remember in the years before it came out wanting the answers to a question. I'd ask people, and if no one knew the answer and I didn't have access to an encyclopedia, I'd have to wait till I could go to a library and try to find the answer. I remember this being very frustrating for me. Sometimes I was left to wonder for days or even longer before I could find out, and sometimes I'd forget about it. But even if you could go to a library, sometimes the answer was hard to find on your own. If you were lucky, a good reference librarian would help you out. But now we can all Google something if we want to know it, and we can find the answer quick. It's nice to know something like J.R.R. Tolkien's birthday if you need to find it, and it's January 3rd, 1892, by the way. And if you're in doubt about the fact you find, look it up in several places. If they all say the same thing, chances are good that your fact is correct. But for every fact that's correct on the internet, there's an avalanche of dubious or downright wrong information. And why is that? Well, there are too many reasons to attempt to cover in this video, but a big one, according to Foster, is that there are no editors on the internet. Bloggers are going to blog, vloggers are going to vlog, but who's going to check behind them to prove their facts are correct? If you said no one, you'd be correct most of the time. Now, some people are honest and double check their facts. But again, lazy, dishonest, or downright fraudulent claims are made on the internet all the time. And in a free society, that's just the way things are. He doesn't say there should be a law against that. People are free to say what they want. But in the days before the internet, news organizations, magazines, and newspapers could be sued or lose their reputation for shoddy work, so they often hired editors to make sure the information was correct. Some reporters and stories still slip through the cracks, but most of the time, the policing system worked. They call them gatekeepers, but they did serve a purpose. And we've largely lost that system today. As a result, we need to be more vigilant about checking information before we believe anything we see. And I'll add as an aside, even though it's not mentioned in his book, with AI these days, you even need to be careful about the pictures and video footage you see. Okay, point number 3. There are a lot of good nonfiction books available to explore. Foster gives many more examples of excellent nonfiction and examines what makes them great. He only covers a few that miss the mark, and there are a few modern classics that he seems to damn with faint praise. But here are some of the books he singles out as excellent reads, and he gives common sense reasons why these books are so good. Read his book for an understanding of how these books demonstrate qualities of excellent nonfiction. Some of the books he covers are Undaunted Courage, Meriwether Lewis, Thomas Jefferson, and the Opening of the American West by Stephen Ambrose, The Boys in the Boat, 9 Americans, and Their Epic Quest for Gold at the 1936 Berlin Olympics by Daniel James Brown, Between the World and Me by Ta-Nehisi Coates, Seabiscuit, An American Legend by Laura Hillenbrand, Annals of the Former World by John McPhee, Hidden Figures, The American Dream and the Untold Story of Black Women Mathematicians Who Helped Win the Space Race by Margot Lee Shatterly. And finally, Astrophysics in a Hurry by Neil deGrasse Tyson. Those weren't the only books he covered, but those were some of the main ones. What I liked least about this book: I would have liked to have seen a chart or a cheat sheet at the back of the book summarizing different strategies to use to examine the worth of different kinds of nonfiction reading he discusses. But I admit that this is lazy on my part. I could easily go back through the book and create my own, and I would benefit from doing so. What I liked best about the book: Foster says his book is irreverent, and he is correct. He doesn't mention that he can be quite engaging and funny, but he is. I liked his jokes and his folksy way of putting things because it put me at ease, and it actually made the information easier to understand. I suppose he developed this style while teaching college students for so many years. Most colleges, at least while Foster was teaching, required students, no matter what their major or minors, to take a few English classes. Chances are good he had a few disengaged students. You can tell from his writing technique that he makes it interesting and relevant without talking down to his reader, which I also think is important. Here's an example. This is from the chapter, It's All in How You Look at Things, and it's under fake news and fake news. Once upon a time, we knew, or thought we knew, that the news was true. Responsible journalists strove to tell the truth, and mostly they did. When they were wrong, they owned up to their error, as when Walter Cronkite, as near to the voice of God as ever appeared on the nightly news, came back from Vietnam convinced that he had been lied to by the Johnson administration, and in particular by Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara, about the war and its prosecution, and that he had been complicit in spreading those lies. His broadcast recanting of his earlier position was a bombshell that shook the nation's belief in itself and its government. Journalists' willingness to admit mistakes is part of why most readers and writers and listeners have been inclined to trust the media until lately. And the number one life lesson I got from the book? While reading nonfiction can make your life better in so many ways, it's up to you, the reader, to read critically so you don't get fooled by sloppy, lazy, and unscrupulous writers out there. Even entire books published by traditional publishers can be misleading and downright inaccurate, so it's on the reader to decide whether it's true or not. More books by Thomas C. Foster include How to Read Literature Like a Professor. At the time of this video, he's updating this book to align more closely with what teachers are using for instruction today. How to Read Novels Like a Professor, a jaunty exploration of the world's favorite literary form. How to Read Poetry Like a Professor, a quippy and sonorous guide to verse. 25 Books That Shaped America. How White Whales, Green Lights, and Restless Spirits Forged Our National Identity. Reading the Silver Screen, a film lover's guide to decoding the art form that moves. And finally, How to Write Like a Writer, a sharp and subversive guide to ignoring inhibitions, inviting inspiration, and finding your true voice. I have this one in my possession, and I'm hoping to read it soon. All these books are listed in the description box below. So that's it for today. Like and subscribe if you like videos about books and reading. And check out my books for more excellent nonfiction books on all topics. And until next time, happy reading.